Love blossoms like an unexpected flower in the unlikeliest gardens when life's vibrant hues blend. Carlos, a hardworking Latino gardener, passionate about nature, meets Emma, a free-spirited white artist seeking inspiration for her next masterpiece. Despite their vastly different worlds, they form a connection as profound as the garden they nurture together. Their love, like the most exquisite bloom, stands out against the backdrop of societal prejudices and internal fears. Will Carlos and Emma's relationship thrive against the odds, or will it wither under discrimination? Their love, like a resilient flower, continues to bloom, inspiring hope and resilience. Carlos had spent his life tending gardens, his hands calloused from years of work. As a second-generation immigrant, he took pride in the beauty he created in the wealthier neighborhoods of San Diego. His love for plants was unmatched, and every flower he planted felt like a personal victory against the hardships he had faced. Emma, on the other hand, lived in a different world. Raised in a suburban household, she was a painter who found inspiration in the raw beauty of nature. Struggling with creative block, she visited the botanical garden near her studio to spark her imagination. Their paths crossed one morning when Carlos was meticulously trimming a rosebush. Emma stopped in her tracks, struck by the beauty of his work. "It's amazing how perfect you've made this look," she remarked, startling him. Carlos looked up, surprised but grateful. "Nature does the hard part. I help it shine." Over the following weeks, Emma returned to the garden, sketchbook in hand, often finding Carlos working nearby. She admired his dedication, while he was intrigued by her vibrant personality and curiosity about his craft. "What's your favorite flower?" she asked one day. "Sunflowers," Carlos replied. "They're strong and always face the light." Emma smiled. "I've found my muse for my next painting." Casual conversations about flowers and art blossomed into a deep-rooted friendship. They started spending hours together, with Emma painting while Carlos worked. Slowly but surely, they opened up about their lives, struggles, and dreams. Their friendship, like the roots of a sturdy tree, grew stronger with each passing day, anchoring them in the face of societal prejudices. But whispers began to circulate among Emma's peers and the residents of the wealthy neighborhood where Carlos worked. "Why is she always talking to the gardener?" some asked, their disapproval thinly veiled. It was nothing new for Carlos, who had faced judgment his entire life. But for Emma, realizing how deeply rooted societal prejudices were came as a shock. Despite the growing tension, they continued to meet, unaware their friendship was the seed of something more profound. As the weeks passed, the bond between Carlos and Emma deepened. What had started as a friendship rooted in mutual respect, crafts was now transforming into something more profound. Emma lingered in the garden long after her sketches were done, her conversations with Carlos becoming the highlight of her day. Carlos, too, felt a shift in his heart. He had always been a private person, preferring the quiet companionship of plants over people. Still, Emma's warmth and curiosity drew him out of his shell. She saw beyond his role as a gardener. She saw the man who poured his soul into every flower bed, who spoke about nature as though it were poetry. One day, as they worked in the garden, Emma set aside her sketchbook and watched Carlos plant a row of marigolds. The sunlight danced on his face, illuminating his deep brown eyes. "Carlos," she began hesitantly, "do you ever feel like you don't belong here?" He paused, looking up at her. "Every day," he admitted. "People see me as just the gardener, not someone with dreams or a story. But this garden, this is where I feel at home." Emma nodded, understanding his words more than she expected. "I feel the same way, but in a different sense. I'm always chasing inspiration, but I've never felt truly grounded until now." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions. Carlos's hands stilled in the soil as he met her gaze. "Emma, you don't have to stay grounded. You're like a butterfly. You're meant to fly." She smiled softly, her heart swelling at his words. Maybe I've found a reason to stay. From that day forward, their interactions were tinged with an unspoken tenderness. Carlos would bring Emma freshly picked flowers, explaining their meanings with a shy smile. Emma, in turn, painted pieces inspired by their time together, her canvases filled with vibrant colors and emotions she hadn't known she possessed. Their interactions, like a captivating dance of art and nature, drew them closer, despite the growing tension around them. But as their feelings grew, so did the tension around them. Emma's friends started noticing her frequent visits to the garden, their comments laced with judgment. "He's not from your world, Emma," one said. "You're wasting your time." Carlos, too, faced whispers among the other workers and disdainful glances from the garden's wealthy patrons. The weight of their growing love and the prejudice surrounding it loomed over them, threatening to overshadow the beauty they had found in each other. Carlos and Emma's relationship was no longer a secret. The vibrant energy they shared, once a source of joy, had become a topic of gossip. Emma's friends, who had initially encouraged her creativity, now questioned her choices. "You're risking everything for him," her closest friend Sarah said during a heated conversation. "Do you even know what people are saying? They think you've lost your mind." Emma's heart sank. She had always believed her friends were open-minded, but now their words felt betrayed. "I don't care what they think," she replied firmly. "Carlos isn't just some gardener. He's kind, thoughtful, and more passionate about life than anyone I've ever met." Carlos, too, felt the sting of judgment. The other workers in the garden whispered behind his back, and the wealthy clients treated him with even more disdain than before. One day, his supervisor approached him sternly as he was packing his tools. "Carlos, I've been hearing things," he said. "You need to be careful. People like us, we don't get second chances." The words hit Carlos like a punch to the gut. He knew the risks of being with Emma, but hearing them voiced so bluntly made the reality of their situation impossible to ignore. That evening, he met Emma at their usual spot in the garden. Her face lit up when she saw him, but her smile faltered when she noticed his somber expression. "Carlos, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. He hesitated, unsure of how to put his feelings into words. "Emma, I don't want to hold you back. Your world is so different from mine." Maybe, maybe this was a mistake." Her eyes widened in shock. "A mistake? Carlos, how can you say that? You mean everything to me." "But what if I can't give you the life you deserve?" he said, trembling. "What if the world is right and we're just fooling ourselves?" Emma took his hands in hers, her grip firm despite the tears in her eyes. "The world doesn't get to decide what we mean to each other. Only we do." Their love, though strong, was now at a crossroads. The choice to fight for each other or give in to the pressures surrounding them was a decision neither of them was ready to make. The weight of the world was beginning to take its toll. For weeks, Carlos and Emma had tried to hold on to the sanctuary they had built in the garden, but the outside world seemed intent on tearing it apart. Emma's friends had grown more vocal in their disapproval. "He doesn't fit into your life, Emma," Sarah said one day during an argument. "Your art career is finally taking off. Do you want to jeopardize that for someone who doesn't belong in your world?" The words stung, but Emma refused to be swayed. "You don't get it, Sarah," she snapped. "Carlos is part of my world. He's the reason my art is thriving and I feel alive. How can you ask me to give that up?" Meanwhile, Carlos faced his challenges. One afternoon, a wealthy client saw him talking to Emma in the garden and complained to the management. "This isn't the place for romance," the client sneered. "He should focus on his job." The incident led to a warning from Carlos's supervisor. "You need to keep things professional, Carlos," he was told. "We can't afford any distractions here." That night, Carlos and Emma met in the garden, their sanctuary now tinged with tension. Emma could see the strain in Carlos's eyes, the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of his struggles. "Carlos, talk to me," she pleaded. "Don't shut me out." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emma, I don't know how long I can do this. Every day, I feel like I'm being judged, like I don't belong. And now it's affecting you too. Emma stepped closer, her voice firm. I don't care what people think. I care about you, about us. We can get through this together. But Carlos shook his head, his heart breaking. What if we can't? What if the world is too much for us? For the first time, doubt crept into Emma's heart. Could their love survive in a world that seemed determined to keep them apart? The conversation ended in silence, the space between them feeling wider than ever. Despite their love, Carlos and Emma decided to take a step back. The constant judgment, the pressure from their peers, and the fear of losing everything they had worked for became overwhelming. For Carlos, the decision felt like ripping out the roots of a plant he had nurtured with care. He threw himself into his work, avoiding the garden where he and Emma had spent so many joyful moments. But every flower he planted reminded him of her laughter, passion, and the way she had seen beauty in him when no one else had. Emma tried to focus on her art, but her canvases remained blank. The vibrant colors that had once flowed so effortlessly now felt dull and lifeless. She missed Carlos's voice, his stories, and how his presence had grounded her in ways she had never thought possible. One day, as she stood in her studio staring at an unfinished painting, Sarah walked in. Emma, you've been distant, she said cautiously. Are you okay? Emma shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, I'm not. I could let him go, but I can't. Carlos isn't just someone I care about. He's why I've become who I am. Meanwhile, Carlos confided in his younger sister Maria. I let her go because I thought it was the right thing to do, he admitted. But now I feel like I've lost some of myself. Maria smiled softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. Love isn't supposed to be easy, Carlos. But it's worth fighting for. If Emma is your light, don't let the darkness take her away. Their time apart was filled with regret and longing, each realizing their love was too precious to give up. The annual community fair brought Carlos and Emma back to the garden. Though neither knew the other would be there, fate had a way of intervening. Carlos was setting up a floral display when he saw Emma standing by the fountain, her eyes scanning the crowd. For a moment, time stood still. He approached her cautiously, his heart pounding. Emma, he said softly. She turned, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. Carlos! They stood in silence for a moment before Emma spoke. I've missed you. Carlos nodded, his voice trembling. I've missed you too. I was wrong to let you go. I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was hurt us both. Emma stepped closer, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't care about the world, Carlos. I care about you, and I'm ready to fight for us, no matter what it takes. A renewed sense of determination marked their reunion. Together, they decided to confront the challenges that had driven them apart, vowing to stand by each other no matter what. Carlos and Emma's love symbolizes resilience and hope in their community. They worked together to transform the garden into a sanctuary for themselves and everyone, a place where diversity was celebrated and love knew no boundaries. Emma's paintings, inspired by their story, gained widespread recognition. Her art showcased the beauty of unity, featuring vivid depictions of flowers and nature interwoven with themes of love and acceptance. Carlos, too, found his voice. He began speaking at community events, sharing his journey and advocating for inclusivity and understanding. Their relationship faced challenges, but together, they proved that love, like a garden, could thrive even in the harshest conditions. And as the sun set over their vibrant, blooming garden, Carlos and Emma knew they had created something extraordinary, a legacy of love that would inspire future generations.